All right. I think
live?
we are live. Give us a few seconds to get onto YouTube here with that classic 20-second delay.
But the YouTubes.
Yeah, out to the YouTubes.
Hello.
Let's make sure I can hear us
It's
on
getting
YouTube.
soft. I think it's hot. My rubber ducky. All right.
We are live.
We're officially live. Where's Al? Steve, I told you to remind Al of the time change.
He sent me a note. Let me see what it said here.
Oh, did he send a...
What time will you be starting the Discord chat room?
Okay.
It's his
So
birthday today.
to
Oh, no. That was 8/29/2021.
That's exactly why the duck is there, Mike. That's why she lives on the top of my...
I'm going to respond now.
Oh, so you never wrote back to him?
I just saw this. I just noticed it.
No. Good morning, Michael. I'm glad you made the time change with us there. That was a tricky maneuver.
Yeah, all you folks not on daylight saving time, congratulations for making the switch.
And Rose too, right? We
yeah. Well, I guess right. So even people who do observe daylight saving time may not have switched yet.
Like Europe.
Yeah.
And Australia and Japan and the entire rest of the world, because we're idiots. And time shifter clock was down overnight when you could have used it because
bad timing.
Stuff we'll be talking about here. Yeah, well, it wasn't down. It was just the redirects weren't working. So whatever you went, any redirect you went to, just went to podfeed.com. So, but we should do roll call, even though Alan's not here. I mean, I hope I can do it right. It was we've got Kevin and Bruce snuck in under the wire, and CJ and Jill and John and Mike and Sandy and Steve and Michael, and I know we've got.
I know Rose is in the house.
Yep. And you never know about the rest of those sidebar people.
Yeah, it's a little tougher over there on that sidebar.
Yeah,
it's a rough place, the sidebar.
Yeah, sidebar people, they're rough and tumble. Yeah, Bruce was talking about the fact that daylight saving time does cost energy. It was, what was it? It was in the 70s they did the study, and energy prices were different, and the profile was different, so yeah.
I'm pretty sure the majority of people would just like to get rid of
the United
daylight saving
States
time.
voted on it. We all voted.
And what happened?
It was like 70% get rid of it.
And
I think they're fixing to plan to maybe have a study to get a committee together to consider it.
Gotcha. So it'll be 10 years.
Yep. All right. We probably need to get going because I got a lot to do here.
Let's do this. So, I haven't even showed the chat room. Let's get the chat room in there.
Oh,
make sure we can see her. I should have done this during roll call. Sorry.
Yeah, you should have. Right after we switched to metric. Exactly. Energy increase when Indiana went from Eastern Standard going to daylight savings. Oh, wow. I lived in Indiana for 3 years. All right, I should probably get started here. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan. No, that's good. All right, here we go. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeed.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, March 13th, 2022, and this is show number 879. Well, I'd like to start the show by saying happy anniversary to Steve. Yesterday, we were married 39 years, and we haven't killed each other yet, so I'm thinking that's good looking good for number 40. Anyway, this has been a really crazy last couple of weeks, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. I've got a couple of great stories to tell you, and Alistair Jenks will come in between them with a fun review as a palate cleanser. That's funny. When you come in, Steve, I hear you.
Oh, am I too loud?
The hum is still there. It's just real light.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's doing that.
Okay.
Oh, I know.
There it is. What was it?
I know it. It's that disc that I brought out for Lindsay. Let me.
Oh.
Let me disconnect.
That might not be your fault. Yep.
There we go. It's dead.
Let's see. Copy.
That's a loud drive. It is pretty old.
No. Yeah. Okay. Copy link. Oh, come on. There we go. All right. That's not your fault because that is a non-standard drive. It is not on the checklist that I know you are so good about.
So it's locked in here.
Yeah. Okay. Go away. Well, if you're looking through a methodical walk through the Apple March Peak event that discusses point by point every detail and spec that Apple presented, you will be sorely disappointed on this week's Chit Chat Across the Pond. Instead of being in any way methodical, Adam Engst of Tidbits and I drive right into the middle and enjoy ourselves talking about whatever we enjoyed. We jump around, we tell anecdotes, we talk about how the landscape is changing for Apple in the industry. We do get into a spec here and there to add flavor to the discussion, and we do talk about the products, but to call our conversation methodical and meticulous would be highly misleading. You can always catch up with Adam's work at tidbits.com to read the longest running internet technology publication. And of course, you can find Chit Chat Across the Pond Light in your podcatcher of choice. Okay. And get rid of that one.
Someone still has their collar on.
Uh-oh. I heard it.
We're good.
Paste, right click, copy link.
Oh, did you get it working?
No.
Oh, you're doing this
Allison,
manually.
take that off, Johnson. Nice. All right.
What's wrong?
I'm thinking of something else I want to say. You didn't recognize me thinking?
Yeah, and it concerned me a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to put a... What was that? Who's barking? Do you have a window open?
No, but she's right below us.
Huh.
I'm going to mute.
Okay. I might close my door too. Okay, let's see. Adam, this one. Last October, I created a diagram to try to explain all of the different options available in laptops for the M1 Pro and M1 Max Apple Silicon processors. In this diagram... Start over. Stop. Last October, I created a diagram to try to explain all of the different options available in laptops for the M1 Pro and M1 Max Apple Silicon processors. Now, this diagram is still valid, but this week when Apple added yet another version of Apple Silicon, the M1 Ultra, things got a little more interesting. In addition, for the first time since 2006, they introduced an entirely new computer, the Apple Studio. I don't know if people realize that it's been that long since an entirely new computer has come out. The last time they introduced an entirely new computer was the first MacBook. They also introduced a new version of the iPad Air, which means we now have 3 iPad models which sport M1 processors. I started thinking about how this might call for a new diagram. Now, it's not entirely obvious, unless you spend quality time on Apple.com, that you can get 3 different kinds of Apple computers with M1 Max, but only 2 with M1 Pro and 1 with M1 Ultra, or that Apple now sells 6 different devices with a regular M1. Now, I hope this new diagram of the Apple M1 family as of March 2022 will be helpful to you. I put the month on the diagram because we've still got the Mac Pro coming out, and I wanted to be ready for that update. In case you're wondering, all of the diagrams that I've made were made with the awesome web-based tool diagrams.net. I also want to draw your attention to a link I'm going to put in the show notes to a fantastic article written by Adam Engst. Now, You guys know how I kind of descend into madness when I get my teeth into some data, like making the previous diagram. Well, Adam makes me look like a rank amateur on this. In his article, he walks through the different kind of configurations and a way to think about the fact that the 27-inch iMac isn't there and what should you buy, knowing that there is no 27-inch iMac and probably won't be a 27-inch iMac. One of the things he looks at is in his diagrams and charts, and he's got lots of things, including money and comparing money to the specs of the Geekbench specs of the different models. And what he tries to explain is that when you think about the expense of the Apple Studio display, think about it in terms of how long you can actually use that display. So he takes, for example, what would it cost you to buy 3 iMacs in a row versus 3 different computers with one studio display, and the different configurations, many of them are much less expensive than you would get if you actually just got an iMac. So it's a really great article. It's of course on tidbits.com, and there will be a link in the show notes to that article. I think it's fantastic. And like I said, he makes me look like I'm not crazy when I do my diagrams and my intense research. Whew, there we go.
That sounded like a lot of winging it.
It was 14-year-old cinema. Yeah, I've never had one die, Bruce. I've literally never had a display die from well,
Apple.
Actually, no, that's not true. My 24-inch first 24-inch cinema display died, and then Apple. It was under warranty. I was at 35 of 36 months in Apple Care, and Apple gave me a 27-inch because the 24 didn't exist anymore. And guess what? The 27 was too tall, and I didn't like it as much as the 24. Yes, he is. Oh, that was what I was going to say. Hang on, let me keep going with this. No chapter mark yet. I also would like to point out that poor Steve has been suffering with the 2017 27-inch iMac, along with his brand new M1 Max MacBook Pro, but we decided to buy him the Mac Studio, M1 Max, and the Apple Studio display. He's getting the Mac Studio at the end of March, but the display doesn't come till about a week later. I hope the poor thing can last that long. In any case, I'm sure I'll be telling you all about it. Maybe even Steve will do a review. We'll see. Ha!
Now you're pushing it.
Yeah. All right. So now I can do a chapter mark. Oh, this is going to be fun. It's going to be long. This is going to be deep. It's going to be gnarly. Copy. And copy link. Okay. Buckle up, kids. I want you guys to hit podfeed.com as much as you can. Do that one. And this one. And we'll go preview. Okay. Let me get comfy. Oh, Alan's here. Hi, everybone. Okay, here we go. Well, I have something very exciting to tell you about. And instead of telling a 2,500-word story first and saving the punchline, I'm going to tell you the news first. I'm still going to tell the 2,500-word story, but you just won't have to wait for the dramatic reveal. Here is the big announcement. Podfeed.com is wicked fast now. We have finally solved all of the problems that were plaguing it, and it is now faster than I ever thought possible. My hope was that we'd get it down to maybe 2-second page loads, but it's way faster than that now. All right, with the fun part out of the way, let's talk about how we fixed it. We'll start with a tiny bit of review. A few weeks ago, I told you about how I was working hard to try to figure out why it was so slow. Now, Podfeed.com hasn't been the snappiest website for a long time, but it had really hit a wall in performance, making it nearly unusable. I threw money at the problem at first by doubling the number of virtual CPUs, and while that did get the server out of its temporary jam, very quickly the percentage CPU usage started to climb again. We were out of 40-second page load times, but we were still seeing hours at a time where the CPU was just skimming under 100% usage. Bart's next idea, as I explained last time, was to move the database to a dedicated server. And that's when our hero, William, also known as Bill, Reveal, joined the party to figure out how to fix that pesky encoding problem. As I reported, things got faster after we successfully moved the database, but still, we had those pesky, 98% load periods for extended periods of time. Bart's next idea was to move podfeed.com under the protection of Cloudflare. They have a free service where they manage the DNS records. Those are the records that allow you to type in a URL and it gets converted to the correct IP address. Cloudflare specialize in protecting those domains under their wing against denial of service attack. Now, we didn't think my server was under a DDoS because the traffic numbers didn't account for that and bandwidth, they just didn't account for it. But we knew it wouldn't hurt. And it didn't hurt, but it also didn't help. At this point, my web server and my database were on separate virtual machines, and both were hosted by DigitalOcean. But Bill noted that the traffic between them was on the open internet, which isn't recommended from a security standpoint if you can help it. In the DigitalOcean service, if you create a new droplet today, which is their name for a virtual machine, they put it in what they call the Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC. VPC is a logically isolated network for cloud resources. The database service, since it was brand new, was created in their VPC, but the original web server was built long enough ago that it was not. Bill suggested that the traffic would be more protected, and hopefully the site would be served more quickly if both servers were on the VPC. Luckily, it's very trivial to move a droplet into the VPC with DigitalOcean. You simply press a button to create a snapshot of your server, wait till it finishes, turn off the original server, and turn on the snapshot in the VPC. I bet you will be shocked to learn that this method did not work for us. The problem was something called cPanel. Now, I'm what my friend Linda would call a reasonably bright girl, but I'm definitely still learning when it comes to managing my servers myself. Bart has been slowly but surely teaching me by having me do all the typing and configuring while he directs and watches. But to be honest, a great deal of it often flies over my head. One of those fly over my head moments was a few years ago when he suggested I use something called cPanel to help me manage my site. Until 2 weeks ago, I thought cPanel was just a nifty little web interface that let me get to things like PHP My Admin to play with my database, maybe add certificates, and do updatey kind of things. Well, evidently, cPanel is much, much more, and it was actually part of the structural fabric of my web server. I know that now because the existence of cPanel in my environment meant it was not possible to put the snapshot of podfeed.com into the VPC. So Bill and I did a lot of searches about how to extricate cPanel from my server, and all of these websites said, don't even try. You just got to burn it to the ground and start over. I mean, all of them. There were some that said, well, you can, but you're going to waste way more time than if you just burn it to the ground and start over. So that's what we did. So Bill was very much in favor of this move for a more fundamental reason. I mentioned before that web servers are often on what's called the LAMP or WAMP stack, where the L stands for Linux, a W would stand for Windows, but usually LAMP. The acronym in its full stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So that's the operating system is Linux, the web server software is Apache, the database is MySQL, and the programming language is PHP. When Bill and I were done, my server was no longer on the LAMP stack. I think the changes and debates we had along the way are really interesting. As I said, PHP is the programming language in LAMP, which I don't actually ever type anything in, but WordPress definitely does. But it turns out there's 2 versions of PHP, which I did not know before this. Now, I promise I won't get too deep into this part, mostly because my understanding is fairly limited, but it may actually be the most significant part of the story. PHP is a way to run a server-side script when an HTTP request comes in. So that's like when you guys ask for something from podfeed.com. The 2 versions of PHP are I'll get this right. The 2 versions of PHP are PHP CGI and PHP FPM. Again, I didn't know these 2 things existed before. It turns out PHP FPM is the fast version of PHP CGI. Well, I want fast, right? I don't want the slow and old and busted one. I want the fast one. As Bill explained it to me, PHP CGI is good for low traffic sites, but PHP FPM, which is the fast CGI process manager, is significantly more efficient for high traffic sites. Well, that got to a question. I had asked Bill, is my site high or low traffic? Well, I know podfeed.com isn't the New York Times, but it's also not Sally's left-handed wingnut supply store either. He did some research into my traffic and statistics, and he declared podfeed.com officially medium. He said I should be congratulated, and I was very proud. Now, Bill said that if we're going to rebuild podfeed.com from scratch, we might as well do it using PHP FPM. He based this theory on the fact that the only thing that seemed to be churning on my server when these CPU bottlenecks were happening was PHP CGI. So, PHP FPM it is. Now, I didn't really appreciate what Bill and I were about to undertake in building podfeed.com from bare metal. While it was a ton of work, it was fascinating, and I had so much fun learning from Bill. Like Bart, Bill directed while I did all of the typing. Now, I'm not even going to pretend that I understood everything we did, and I definitely couldn't replicate, 90% of what we did, but I get a better appreciation for what it means to build a server from scratch. The first thing you have to do is decide on an operating system. Well, this first decision created an interesting discussion between Bart, Bill, and me. Bart likes CentOS, and because it's what he manages with his university work hat on, and it has a lot of great features. But if it was all up to Bill, he would have gone with Ubuntu. Now, CentOS is more of an enterprise-level OS with lots of security features built in, which is a good thing, but being an enterprise operating system means it moves more slowly, so CentOS is actually using a fairly old version of PHP. Bart, Bill, and I had to discuss which way to go. Now, my worry at this point was I would be caught between these two people who are both doing so much work to help me. Now, nerds can get into holy wars, but that wasn't going to happen with Bill and Bart. Because they're both fine, intelligent people with good hearts, we quickly decided to go with Bart's choice of CentOS because we know he'll be working with me for the long haul. Having gotten to know Bill, I suspect he'll be with me for the long haul too, but we had to flip a coin and the toss went to CentOS. The second decision was which web server software to go with. Remember I said that the A in LAMP was for Apache and that was the web server software? Turns out Apache's not the only option for web server software. Bart prefers something called Nginx. It's spelled Nginx. I have no idea why. I do remember 100 years ago, he stood up a tiny IRC chat server for me, and he used Nginx when he built it, but I didn't really know what that meant back then. Now, Bart sees Nginx as much easier to manage than Apache, but of course, Bill was much more comfortable with Apache. The coin toss went again to Bart, and we went with Nginx. Now, remember I said my web server isn't on the LAMP stack anymore? Well, the M is gone altogether because MySQL isn't even running on the web server. It's over on that separate database, dedicated database server. So that would leave me with LAP. But the A is gone too because I'm not using Apache as the web server software. I'm using Nginx. That means I have a LNP server. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it? I can't even pronounce it. It's LNP. Now, another thing I didn't appreciate before we went into this exercise is what doesn't exist when you stand up a virtual machine with just an operating system. There was nothing there. I mean, not even a user account for me. We had to install tools in order to install tools. Now, the good news for you is that I can't remember everything we did, and I probably couldn't explain most of it. But once we had Nginx functioning as a web server, it was actually a pretty easy task to copy over all of the WordPress files to the new server and point the Cloudflare DNS at the new server. But there was another piece to figure out, and it hasn't been working completely right just yet. It may be by now, but it was pretty messed up as of this morning. You know how I tell you to go to podfeed.com/Patreon to help support the show? But if you type that in, it actually takes you to patreon.com. That works because of what's called a redirect. And in Apache, it's stored in a text file called .htaccess. Donald Burr actually helped me build my .htaccess file years and years ago. And every time I think of something new for which I want to give you an easy link, I just copy a line Donald wrote and I change it for the new redirect. I love these redirects because if at some point there's a better way to support the show than Patreon, I can keep podfeed.com/Patreon and just redirect it to the new service. You don't have to remember. I also use these for internal links like podfeed.com/live actually goes to https://www.podfeed.com/blog/NosillaCast-live. That is way too hard to remember. Podfeed.com/live. Everything good starts with podfeed.com. All of that is because of this .htaccess file. But guess what? Nginx doesn't use .htaccess. It uses a .conf file. CONF is what I'm saying there. So .conf. Anyway, that's inside the Nginx directory. The syntax is completely different from .htaccess, and I don't understand it very well at all. It was unfamiliar to Bill as well, and we got most of it working, but even with his help, we managed to make an infinite loop of redirects within podfeed.com at one point. Since without Patreon and PayPal, I don't get paid, I said I wasn't willing to move the server over until we had at least those two links functioning. Eventually, we got them working, and we got most of the redirects working, so we flipped the switch to move to the new, built-from-scratch server. I told you it's fast now, and I even said wicked fast. I can prove that with real numbers. When all this mess started, I installed a plugin for WordPress called Query Monitor. That's over on my web server, but inside the WordPress interface. We installed this because it would report on errors and warnings that we hoped would point at a root cause for these big slowdowns. It didn't find anything wrong, which was disappointing, but of course, it was actually good news. But Query Monitor also has a little display that shows when you're logged into WordPress to tell you how fast the pages are loading. After I doubled the number of CPUs, the page loads went from as bad as 40 seconds down to 6 seconds. Now, on occasion, when podfeed.com was in a good mood and the wind was blowing, and it was maybe on a Wednesday, it would get down to maybe 2 seconds to paint a page. I know that sounds great, but 2 seconds is actually really annoyingly long. After Bill and I built the web server from scratch, running Nginx and PHP FPM, the fast version, with a dedicated database server and using Cloudflare, I am happy to report that most pages come up in about a quarter of a second. Seriously, a 10x improvement in speed. Now, I find it interesting that we still don't know why the original server was churning the CPU so hard. We know the database move didn't fix it, and neither did going behind Cloudflare. They might have helped a little bit, but they didn't really fix that root cause problem. We're pretty sure nothing was attacking it from the outside, but clearly something was going on inside the machine. Was it PHP CGI? Was it Apache? Was it nearly 17 years of cruft and just barely time to do a nuke and pave? We'll never know. The one thing we do know is the speed of podfeed.com makes me deliriously happy. Made me happy when I created my diagram about the different M1 options, and I knew if it got popular, people would get it quickly, which helps it get more popular. It also makes both Steve and me positively joyous because we're the ones who have to go into the WordPress interface all the time, which took forever until now. I used Mars Edit to write the blog post, and when I would hit publish, I could just go make a cup of coffee before it would actually be up on podfeed.com. I love it so much, I just keep going to page after page on my own website to watch it blink and load. Of all the comments about how fast the site is now, I think my latest favorite is what Alistair Jenks said in Slack. He said, "It's disconcertingly fast." Isn't that awesome? Well, another super fun side effect of this work was that Bill slowly and gently improved my skills using the VI editor, or as he calls it, Vi. He didn't make me use it, but I said I wanted to get better at it. I was using some other editing tools, but I know VI's the good one and I should be using it. By the end of 2 weeks of working together, he started noticing I was getting faster at anticipating what he was going to tell me to do and becoming more natural in using the tools of managing a server. I simply cannot thank Bill enough for all of his help. I said he did a lot before, but what he did in the last couple of weeks and the time he spent was beyond generous. I'm talking like we were together probably 10 or 15 hours, and he did at least 10 hours of research and side work on his own. He even built a server so that using Nginx and PHP FPM so he would know how to do it when he helped me. But throughout all of this, he was fun. He taught me so many things. We laughed a lot, mostly geek jokes, and we were successful. I told him that Steve and I really felt we should pay him for his time because he does do some of this as a side job. He's retired, but he does it for real money. But he wouldn't let us do that. He said that he's been listening to the NosillaCast for something like 15 years and that he's never contributed anything before. He was happy that he was finally able to contribute in a meaningful way. Gotta tell you guys, Bill is my hero. So now please go to podfeed.com and push all the links and rejoice with all of us at how fast it is.
Now watch it fall down in a heap when everyone does a refresh.
That's it. Oh, Mike, that's funny. Somebody else sent me the one, the same one, same GIF, except where he's holding a glass of champagne.
Yeah, and he tips it.
Blink or plink.
It is speedy.
Oh, that made me happy. All right. We are going to do a break here for Alistair. It's going to end up being a long show. There. Nope. There. What? You sound like you were about to say something.
Oh, I just I wasn't there in time to see the link. Is it in?
Just doing it now. It's a lot more work by hand.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to complain because we think, Mike and I think we might know what happened. There's a macro that he wrote that the big macro depends on, and I appear to have deleted it. I was
Nowhere to
doing
be
some
found?
cleanup. Well, he's got a copy of it, so that's the good news. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I don't need this. Okay. Let's give a quick. Not going to have too much time to listen, but let's listen for a moment. Now, please go to podfeed.com and push all the links and rejoice with all of us at how fast it is.
I recently purchased a new desk for my study, which I reviewed in a separate submission. If you heard or read that, you may recall I said my old desk was 1.2 meters long and the new one is 1.8 meters long. Sitting in the center of the desk, each end is now 300 millimeters further away, which isn't generally a problem except for one thing. A few years ago, I think after Bart did the same, I purchased a desk mount microphone boom. I bought it off a local auction site for a little over $20, so it wasn't anything fancy, but it got the job done. The issue it has now is its maximum reach of only 700 millimeters. When clamped to the end of my new desk, it is 200 millimeters shy of making it to the center where I sit. I considered various workarounds like positioning my computer 200 millimeters off center or clamping it to the front of the desk 200 millimeters from the end. Neither of these was satisfactory as they impinged on other uses of the desk space.
Okay, you don't get to listen to him now. Sorry. I know, you got to listen to me again. All right, I'm going to do a little addition at the end.
Bought at another local business that was needed once I bought a Mac with no line-in socket.
Well, I got to tell you, I am such a huge fan of boom arms for microphones. Being able to get your mic out of the way is the best thing ever. And like he says, it isolates the sound better. Alistair did ask me to add one new update to his review. He recorded this a while ago, and when he recorded it for us, he was using a Behringer interface. But since then, he has replaced the Behringer with the Elgato Wave XLR, and I quote here, "because Marty made us all do it." I thought that was funny. To anybody who wasn't here at the beginning, when I went to post Alistair's blog post, his blog post has been around for quite a while. And when I went to post it, it was filled with those bad encoding characters. So every apostrophe was like an A with a circumflex on it, followed by a euro symbol, and then a trademark symbol. It was a big mess. And I wrote Alistair a note and said, "Can you check it? Because I've edited your work and I want to make sure I guessed right." Because in some cases I'm like, I don't know, what did he mean there? A semicolon? Maybe it was an end dash. I don't know. And so I was kind of winging it. And anyway, he said, "Yeah, I did find some mistakes." And I dictated into my phone that I was at my grandson's christening, and could you just go ahead and fix it? What Siri wrote back was, "Shut up and fix it."
And hold my beer.
Shut up and fix it. So that is my new phrase. So later on, Sandy found another mistake. I sent it to Alistair and said, "Shut up and fix it."
He understood it was a dictation.
Yeah. Well, he's the one who said, I trust that you were using dictation there.
Good. Well, you're making fast time.
I have a lot to read, though.
Oh, the last one's okay. You know what it's time for?
Pledge break.
Support the show. Exactly. Too bad Frank isn't here to hear this one.
Yeah, did Frank
he joined us. He did, but he actually was here for a little bit, but he said he couldn't stick around. He had a lot going on.
All right. He checked in. Good. More tea. Ice water. All right. Here we go. A few weeks ago, when I was explaining the work that Bill, Bart, and I were doing to increase the speed of podfeed.com, I told you that it was costing me more and more money as we kept adding resources to try to fix the problem, like the dedicated database server and doubling the number of CPUs. Now, the great news is that a fair number of people stepped up to help defray those increased costs. One of those people, not one, try this again. A few weeks ago, when I was explaining the work Bill, Bart, and I were doing to try to increase the speed of podfeed.com, I told you that it was costing me more and more money as we added resources like the dedicated database server and doubling the number of CPUs in our attempts to fix the problem. Now, the great news is that a fair number of people stepped up to help defray those increased costs. Most of those people were already patrons, which is even more amazing. I got to tell you about a new one. The spectacular Stephen Ewell just doubled his pledge to help cover the bills. Now, how cool is that? Well, more good news is that with the elimination of cPanel from my server, it's actually going to save me $15 a month. With all the new contributions, it definitely has paid for the increases in cost. But the podcast definitely still does cost me money to produce. I do not yet break even. If you'd like to help support the show like Stephen, please go to podfeed.com/Patreon and choose an amount that shows the value you get out of what you learn here. Or if you prefer a one-time donation, go to podfeed.com/PayPal. And yes, both of those links are working. All right.
And fast.
Attendance credit. What's that?
And they're working fast.
Yes.
Fastly.
Well, I don't know how fast those are. See, those are external links. In fact, I noticed one of those was actually slower. Thank you for the chapter mark, Kevin. Copy link. Okay. Let's see. Weren't you recording something? You were recording something.
Oh, yeah, but that's not going to be for
today.
It's going to take a little while. It's a production.
Oh God, I don't believe it. There's bad encoding stuff in this article. All right.
Well, looks good to me.
Tell application $QUOT finder $QUOT. You got to look down at the code block. Does the code block show?
Code block looks fine.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'm going to shut up and fix it, Joe.
Well, is it maybe Mars Edit that's got the problem?
Look at what I just posted.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I've still got leftovers. I'll leave it alone.
Well, how can it be? So how are you reading it? What application are you using?
I'm in Mars Edit. Let's just hope if it's fine on the web.
It's fine on the web.
So look at what I just posted. So you
I
don't
did,
see
and
it. Okay.
I'll show you mine.
I'm not going to take. I'll show you yours if you show me mine. Not sideways, but there's some puppies. Wait a minute. Oh. There you go. Okay, good.
So that's fine.
Okay, then I'm not touching it.
Yep.
Good. All right. Here we go. Waiting for Steve to disappear. There you go. I am a huge fan of the well-known app Hazel from Noodlesoft. You've probably heard of it and may use it yourself, but just in case you haven't, I'll briefly describe what it does and then the problem it solves for me before I tell you why I'm talking about it today. Hazel watches folders you specify and then takes action on the items in those folders according to rules you specify. Many people learned to use Hazel during the dawn of the paperless movement because Hazel can recognize text patterns, set the name of the scanned documents to match, and then file away those scanned documents into folders according to those names. While Steve and I use Hazel in exactly that way, I have another huge use case for this delightful tool. I create a lot of data every week with the podcast. The audio and image files for the NosillaCast and Chit Chat Across the Pond add up to around 4 gigabytes per week. You can imagine that if I didn't pay attention, I'd soon be out of disk space. In the old days, I had to remember to go clean out these directories by hand, but with Hazel, I have it all automated. I still want to keep these files, but they definitely don't need to live on my internal laptop drive. When a podcast episode ages past 2 weeks, my rules tell Hazel to sweep up after me and whisk all of these files over to my network-attached storage. In order to perform this magic, I have a tiny Apple script in my rules for each folder that tells the application finder to mount the volume for the share on my NAS. I didn't write this Apple script. It was actually written for me years ago by one of the lovely developers who works on ChronoSync. The Apple script simply tells the finder to try to mount the server by its IP address, and if it can't do it, throw an error to tell me that it failed. This process works flawlessly, till one of two things happen. As soon as I leave my home network, I am bombarded with error messages because that script can't find my NAS to mount the share. My only recourse is to open Hazel and pause every rule one by one that is associated with moving files to my NAS. I have to then put in a reminder to unpause those rules when I come back home. The other problem is that our NAS is in our spare bedroom. Whenever we have friends or family spend the night, Steve shuts it down so the noise and lights don't bother our guests. Personally, I just leave it running and tell them to live with it, but Steve is a much better host than I am. The main reason I'd tell them to live with it is, again, that I get bombarded with error messages because my script can't mount the share on the NAS, and Hazel warns me about this catastrophe every single time. Again, with the pausing and unpausing dance. Well, I was recently chatting with Paul Kim, the awesome developer of Hazel, about my problem, and he made a suggestion that made me slap my head that I didn't think of it before. He asked me why I don't include in the script a test to find out if the server is available before trying to mount the drive. This was so obvious, and yet it never occurred to me. I solved the problem using a combination of Apple shortcuts and a shell script. But guess what? I'd never written a successful shell script or shortcut before. I confess that because I want you to realize that you can probably figure this out too. I don't want you to think I'm some accomplished developer now who knows how to write these scripts. I'm just someone who's gained confidence by trying and having small victories. Those small victories give me more confidence to try the next thing the next time. Now, I started by looking at the existing Apple script I'd embedded in Hazel, and I thought about, do I really want to invest time learning more about AppleScript? It's certainly a very viable scripting language on the Mac, but it's not getting any love from Apple these days, and I really don't like sticking with things that most likely are on their way out of fashion. If I'm going to learn something new, I'd rather learn it in an enthusiastically supported environment. In Hazel, there's a drop-down to allow you to choose the scripting language option. And in addition to AppleScript, I discovered that you can run JavaScript, automator workflows, shell scripts, and shortcuts. I've tried several times to use shortcuts, and every single time I gave up because I couldn't get it to do my bidding. I really did want to find something this automation technology could do for me because all the cool kids seemed to be doing it. It was time to try shortcuts again. I launched the Shortcuts app on my Mac and I typed server into the search window for available actions. I was delighted to find the connect to servers action. The delightful thing about shortcuts and automator before it is that you can simply drag and drop these actions into a workflow. I dragged the connect to servers action into the workflow and it helpfully suggested I type in SMB://. That's the method to make the connection. SMB is a network file sharing protocol, which you'll often hear referred to as Samba. And Samba is the free and open source implementation of the original SMB. Samba runs on pretty much everything on Linux, Solaris, macOS, and Windows. So just like you type https:// to get to a website, you type SMB:// to get to a server on your network. I pointed the connect to server action to the IP address of my NAS and actually to the file share name of my Synology NAS, and I ran the shortcut and boom, the share mounted as a volume on my desktop. I really felt like this is going to be an easy task. All I had to do next was wrap a couple of if-then-else statements around that action, and I'd be golden. So, what conditions need to be checked? I knew that the most crucial if statement I needed was to only run this action if I was on the same network as the NAS. I did a search in shortcuts for network, and I found the action get network details. That sounded like a good place to start, so I dragged it in before the connect to server action. Get network details can return the network name, so I was able to add an if statement comparing the network name to the name of my main Wi-Fi network. From there, if they matched, I could tell it to connect to the server and mount the share. I tested it while on my main Wi-Fi network, and it successfully mounted the server share. I switched to my guest Wi-Fi network, and it skipped right over the connect to server part and stopped silently with no annoying warnings about not being able to find it. This was a great start, but there are 3 issues with this. Number 1, I'd have to be on Wi-Fi for this to work. When I'm streaming video for the live show or as a guest on other shows, I always disable Wi-Fi because it makes for a more stable connection. While this workflow solves the first problem of checking to see if I'm on my home network, it doesn't tell me that the server is alive on the network. This shortcut I had written will fail if Steve puts the Synology to sleep. Finally, and surprisingly, if the server is already mounted, actually, I said that wrong. It'll fail if Steve shuts down the Synology. So finally, and surprisingly, if the server is already mounted, the shortcut fails and pops up an alert telling me it failed. So while Shortcuts was easy and quick, just like Automator before it, I had to bring out heavier tools to create a workflow that could provide the granularity I required. It was time to use a shell script. I wasn't going to abandon Shortcuts, but rather use a combination of the two tools. Before I walk through how I figured out what to put in the shell script, let me quickly explain what a shell script actually is. You know how you can open the terminal and type in a command? That command you're typing is going into what's called a shell. Shell scripts are just a bunch of terminal shell commands piled together. For example, in terminal, you can type cd tilde, where the tilde means your home directory. When I type cd tilde, it takes me to /user/Allison. To create a shell script for the same action, I could open TextEdit and type in cd tilde, save the file as myscript.txt, and then run it as a shell script. I'm sure the real nerds are having fits to hear me explain it so simplistically, but I'm going to say it again. A shell script is just a bunch of terminal commands that you run one after another. Now, I mentioned up front that I've never actually written a shell script before, but luckily the internet has written lots of them. It's all about figuring out the right search terms. The first thing I wanted my fancy shell script to do was to find out if my NAS was alive on the same network as my Mac. I'm going to take a break and save and drink some water. Did I miss anything fun?
Well, you missed Rose's cat,
Ooh,
Bouncer.
No, neighbor's cat.
Neighbor's cat.
Decided my lap belongs to him. Aw. That's a good-looking cat.
Yeah.
Getting tired. All right, power through, Al. Here we go. Saving again. Thank you, Kevin. Now, my NAS has a static IP address, which will be helpful in identifying if it's alive on the network. In the terminal, you can ping an IP address to find out if there's an active device at that IP. Just like pinging in a submarine to find potential enemies, when you ping an IP, you don't actually find out what's at that address, you just know something is there. Just like pinging in a submarine when you send sound out and see if it reflects back, pinging an IP address sends a packet of data at that address and waits to see if it echoes back. Make sense so far? I figured if I could ping the NAS to see if it's there, but the ping command by itself, I figured I could ping the NAS to see if it's there, but the problem is the ping command by itself just never stops. It just keeps going ping, 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 and tells you the answer. Tells you whether to find something. I only needed one packet sent and echoed back to know that the server is alive at that address. I did some Googling and I found that adding -c space 1 to the ping command would mean to count to one packet and then stop. See what I mean about you can just Google it? I don't know any of this stuff. I'm just figuring it out as I go. -c space 1, count to 1. That's pretty easy. Since my shell script is just going to be a pile of terminal commands, I can test each one in my terminal before putting it into my shell script. While on the same network with the server, I typed into the terminal ping space -c1, and sure enough, it sent one packet of data, it was echoed back, and the command stopped. Then I switched network so that the server shouldn't be found. The same command definitely failed to find the server, but it took forever. Now, forever was just a couple of seconds, but we've already talked about how long a couple of seconds feels, and why should I wait around if the server just isn't there? It's not like I'm trying to ping a server in Nepal. It should be on my internal network, so it will either respond instantly or not at all. I did some reading of the man page for ping. Man is just short for manual, and I found the flag -W, a capital W, which lets you define the wait time in milliseconds for a response. 1 millisecond turns out to be plenty of time on my home network for me to know if my server's live. So now I can say ping -c1 for count to 1 and -W1, my server IP. I can instantly know that the server is there or it's not. I tested it on and off the main network and it succeeded and failed instantly. I was ready to start writing my shell script. I searched in shortcuts for the action script, and I found the run shell script action, and I dragged it into my workflow. I pasted the full ping command into the shell script, and I ran the action. I thought that my if-then-else statements would have to rely on interpreting the success or failure messages returned by the ping command, but it turned out to be much simpler than that. I discovered that if the ping command succeeds, it returns a value of true. If it fails, it returns false. So I only had to write if ping-c1-w1 at this IP, then do something, which means if the ping succeeds, take the next action. So you just say if ping. That's all you have to say. If ping, because it's going to be true, you gets to go on to the next action. Now, sure, that's nerdier than my original find out if it's on the same Wi-Fi network shortcut, but this test works whether I'm on Wi-Fi or hardwired Ethernet. Now, remember that my shortcut failed if it tried to mount the server when it was already mounted. So now I had to figure out how to determine if the server's already mounted. If it isn't, the script should mount it. But if it is, the script should just stop silently. Now, I have to get just a smidge nerdier here, but I promise it won't hurt. I want to teach you two very easy concepts. The first is the command grep. Think of grep as a synonym for the word search. I don't know why the nerds don't use search, but use grep. But anyway, we'll go with it. It's a funny word, but it's a simple concept. It just means search. The second term is called pipe, but it's a symbol, not a word. On a US keyboard, pipe is the vertical line right above the return key. Piping means to hand off the result of one command to another command. In my shell script, I wanted to take the result of one search and hand it off to a second search. So I'm going to grep for a search term, and then I'll pipe the results of that search into another grep to narrow the results. So it'll be grep, pipe, grep. Pretty simple, right? You with me so far? I discovered in my Googling that the simple command mount in the terminal will show you every volume mounted on your Mac. It's actually pretty interesting. You can see system volumes like pre-boot and update. You can see your data volume, services like Google Drive, and any local servers you have mounted. We can search the results of the mount command by handing off the results, piping, to our new friend grep. Put that in an if statement, and we finally know whether the server is alive on the same network. All I had to write was mount space grep space server IP. Now, I won't take the explanation of the shell script any further because I think you get the basic idea of how I was building it up. I have figured out that at the command line, and thus in a shell script, how to test whether the server is alive on the same network and then test to see if it's already mounted. I told the script to echo back one of three messages depending on the results. The first one was, IP is pining for the fjords, if it didn't find the IP on the network. Server is mounted already, if it found the IP, but the server was already mounted. And server is unmounted if it found the IP, but the server was unmounted. That bit about the IP pining for the fjords was a funny return message someone posted in a forum, and I just decided to keep it, because checking to see if the echoed message said anything about fjords was easy and just darn fun. All right, we got to get back to shortcuts. At this point, I'm relatively certain I could have finished the entire automation just using a shell script, but I was determined to finally get a shortcut to do something useful for me, so I embedded the shell script into shortcuts, and I used the logic in shortcuts to complete the job. My new shell script will now tell me one of those three answers, so now I need to feed the answers into a variable so that the shortcut will know whether or not to mount the server share. Now, in shortcuts, it's pretty easy to get a variable out of the previous action, but for some reason, you can't do it directly that I've found. I wanted to first capture the output message from my shell script so I could test to see if it included the word fjord. Oddly, this is a two-step process. First, you have the output flow into a text action, and then from the text action, you can capture it as a variable. Dragging a text action below the shell script allowed me to find get text from, and then it auto-filled the shell script result. Now that it was considered text, I could set a variable name to the text I just acquired. Now, this whole thing sounds silly, and it sounds even dumber as I try to describe it, because the echoed information was already text. But that's how the shortcuts work. Once I cracked the code on creating variables from text, I was ready to run some if-then-else actions. If the text variable contains the word fjords, then we know the server's unavailable. I could then put in a conditional that says, if the variable does not contain the word fjords, then I know it is on the network, so let's keep on going. To create these conditional shortcuts actions have one called if, which you can drag in, and it very helpfully pops the then and else actions in for you. I really like that. After determining that it is on the network, since the variable doesn't contain fjords, I can run another if-then-else set of conditions to check to see if the share is mounted or not. If it's not mounted, only then should the shortcut connect to the server. And it all worked. I felt like I had made fire. I do want to say that shortcuts is really buggy, though. I ran into so many things, like twice I accidentally deleted an action, and then I hit Command-Z to undo, and it crashed shortcuts and erased everything I had written in my shortcuts. So I thought, wow, am I just unlucky? I'm running into all these bugs. And I did a search online, and I found all these people talking about how buggy shortcuts is. Even David Sparks, who is all over automation, he says it's a little too buggy to use right now. He sees the vision and sees where it's going, but he really thinks maybe using things like Keyboard Maestro is the way to go, not trying to use shortcuts for this kind of stuff. And I got to tell you, I would have probably had a much easier time if I'd just done it all in the shell script. Now, here's a question. Would any of what I just did be helpful to you? I'd been talking to Stephen Getz in Telegram while I was working on this, and he started working on his own version in parallel with me to kind of help out. And he also wanted to have something similar to this. It was super fun to pass ideas back and forth while we were both learning and to both complain about how buggy shortcuts is. When I got my version working, I wanted to give it to him so he didn't have to build it himself. If I was going to share the shortcut, it made sense to put in comments explaining what it was doing and how. I also thought it would be more useful if I assigned some variables for the IP address and the share name. That way, Stephen could simply replace the placeholder for the IP address with the one for his NAS and the share he wants to mount, and not have to do a search and replace for every instance where I had put my own. And once I'd done that for Stephen, I realized I could share my shortcut with you. Luckily, Apple has a built-in share option that creates an iCloud link, so it's easy to share the love. If you'd like to download my little shortcut and use it yourself, enjoy Mount Server Share on Local Network. Link in the show notes. As with anything you download from the internet, please open it and read what it does, and make sure you understand it before running it with reckless abandon. I do not warranty this in any way, shape, or form. And remember, I'm very new at this, so the chances I mess something up are very high. In any case, though, I'm really pleased with my shortcut and my shell script. I solved a real problem by automating it away, and I learned a lot. I will never have to fuss with Hazel again when I'm away from home, and now I won't resent our sleepover company when they come to stay. I have to thank Paul Kim for giving me the obvious idea, and Stephen Getz for helping me think through all of this. I'm sure there are more efficient and elegant solutions out there, but it doesn't make me any less proud of what I've accomplished. The best part is when I point Hazel at my fancy new shortcut, it actually worked. Next up, I'm going to add my shortcut to my Stream Deck so I can mount my share with the push of a button anytime I need it. Whew.
Good job. You made fire.
I did. I made fire.
Without
Man,
Winston.
Shortcuts is garbage. It's really hot garbage. Okay, not that one. Where's the other one? All right. Let's bring it home.
How's your timing? 46?
48 minutes.
48?
I'm good. All right, here goes. Well, with all of that, I am exhausted, so I'm going to wind this up for this week. Did you know you could email me at allison@podfeed.com anytime you like? If you have a question or a suggestion, just send it on over. You can follow me on Twitter at Podfeed. If you want to join in the conversation, I can highly recommend joining our Slack community at podfeed.com/Slack, where you can talk to me and all the other lovely NosillaCastaways, including Bill Reveal and Bart. Remember, everything good starts with podfeed.com. You can support the show at podfeed.com/Patreon like the awesome Stephen Ewell does, or with a one-time donation at podfeed.com/PayPal like Christoph does once a quarter. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, like CJ from Ann Arbor did after a long time away, head on over to podfeed.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.
True to form, Al reminded us of
Alan,
I think he's trolling us now.
I think Alan's always
always trolling us.
Uh-oh. That's not the right one. That's Dumb Question Core music.
Let me get that GIF going here.
Oh, I know. I forgot to... Wait, Netflix is going to $20 now? Geez, they're
Wow.
They're updating it about every 2 weeks. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing. The feeds all broke after we moved the server. When I went to post Chit Chat Across the Pond this week, I couldn't. And reconnecting it back to the server, Bill had to help me with that again. So
You didn't have to take that down, Al. Oh no, there it is. It's still there.
put down.
I thought he removed
Alan
it.
did it? Okay.
Kevin just posted his big old thing, so it's
Count chapter marks 1 second here and stay subscribed. Okay. All right. My chapter count, including, I really should. I'm gonna make. I've got this many Post-it notes on my desk right now. Things I need to do that I'm not doing. I'm gonna make another one. I need to make in my automation for the show notes. I need to make support the show a link so that Steve automatically make link. That way you'll know that there's that many links.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have to add one. I have 6.
Yep, 5 + 1.
All right. How many simultaneously streams? Oh, not me. Frank! Oh no, Frank! Frank from Japan, we changed time zone to our daylight saving time nonsense, whatever. So you've just come right at the end of the show. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe he's here for something else.
No, I'm betting. Since he's from Japan, that's not what it was.
Yeah.
All right. Let me export the show.
Try to get the word out. Slack and Facebook is where, I guess we didn't send out an email message.
Did you do Podfeet? Oh, yeah, I could have done.
Could have done Podfeed Press.
Yeah, I tend not to. But that's too bad. But I'm glad you're here so that you know next week. Hi, Frank. Bye, Frank. Mike says. All right. I am going to close this out here. Or actually, Steve is. My rubber ducky says goodbye. I got to kiss Rose goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye, Rose.
Night, Gracie.
That's my ducky.